conflict. Another typical example is El Salvador in Latin America. This small country, with a population of 6.7 million, was the scene of a bitter civil war in the 80s.
El Salvador is very representative of what happened in the Latin American continent in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. It was an ideological conflict. It was not an ethnic conflict or a religious conflict. It was 25 years ago. Now it's over, and we know that we can have a contact with the former guerrilla, which is a political party today.
In 1992, the government and the FMLN, the Farabundo Marti Liberation Front, signed a peace agreement. Since then, many former FMLN guerrillas have integrated into the country's democratic political system. Carlos Castaneda, a former fighter, is now a member of parliament, but the memories of his revolutionary past are still very fresh.
He was a former commander. He was wounded in combat and died in April 1986.
On the 8th of May, 1979, the FMLN held a rally against the government. The police shot and wounded several demonstrators outside the main church of San Salvador. The confrontation turned into a civil war. 80,000 people were killed and more than 500,000 were displaced. Today, thousands are still missing. The ICRC was very active in this arena.
Nos encontramos varias veces con el ICRC.
We often met the ICRC in hospitals, in prisons, and during battles. Their role was essential.
And today, with the distance of time, how do you see, let's say, the role of the ICRC during the conflict in El Salvador?
Obviously, with some distance, the conflict becomes relative. What would have happened in a conflict with such enormous dimensions, with fights and wounded people? What would have happened without the National Red Cross and the essential role of the ICRC? Who would have witnessed or noticed?
Nidia Diaz, one of the most important FMLN commanders, benefited directly from ICRC's commitment to protect persons who are arrested and detained in relation with an armed conflict. It is a famous story published in her book, I Was Never Alone.
It's on my people's struggle, on being alone in a cell, and also on the Red Cross. That's why I never felt alone. I was wounded and captured in combat. An American-Cuban caught me. I realized I could not die because I really wanted to die. I was wounded. So I tried to find the means to kill myself, but he prevented me to do it. He put me into the helicopter, pointing a gun at my head. I tried to jump into the void. Later, the helicopter landed at the Air Force Base. I fainted several times lying in the stretcher. Then I shouted one thing only. I am a prisoner of war. I want the Geneva Conventions applied to me. I want to see the ICRC. One day they said the press wanted to see me. Blindfolded, they pulled me out. In the cell were various groups, amongst them the ICRC. And they said, be patient. You are now registered and you can't disappear. You are a prisoner. Be patient. Investigations are ongoing. It's important when the Red Cross is visiting a prisoner, they cannot just take him out of prison. But they can guarantee that his rights are being respected. The Red Cross raised my spirits and brought food. The American Congress applied pressure until I was finally operated in August. The Red Cross helped organize my transfer from the prison to a private clinic.
ICRC successes, like the story of Nydia, are possible only if delegates in the field have free access to all victims of a conflict. That can only happen if all parties accept the presence of the ICRC as an independent, neutral, and completely impartial organization.
Did you trust the delegates of the International Red Cross?
I never distrusted them particularly.
¿Cómo se garantizaba una evacuación realmente?
How would you guarantee an evacuation without human rights violations?
Problemas de violación de los derechos humanos. Esto se hizo con los aparatos de la Cruz Roja, tanto del aparato nacional como
This was organized by the National and the International Red Cross through respected corridors and adequate passages, so the army could not attack the wounded.
y el ejército no pudiese en esas condiciones arremeter contra los heridos de guerra. Es posible que al principio, quizás en otras cabezas,
Possibly, in the beginning, some people might have distrusted these institutions.
que aparecían y había temor. Yo lo he escuchado por
There was fear they could inform the enemy on locations and organizations of their guerrilla.
conocido la zona, el dispositivo de algunas estructuras de la guerrilla.
But whenever I met them, I felt that their humanitarian work was of very high value.
Yo pienso que fue una labor humanitaria de mucha valía en nuestro conflicto.
One of the central preoccupations of FMLN was to make sure that the civilian population would not turn their backs against them. Tio Leo, a former fighter, insists on respecting people and their property.
La población fue tratada adecuadamente, que no fue maltratada.
It was important to respect and not mistreat the population.
Porque uno tenía la mayor parte de su vida relacionándose.
We spent most of our time maintaining good relations with the civilians.
Entonces, de eso dependía, ¿no? De que la población creyera en nosotros.
We depended on their belief in us and that we were respecting human rights, their well-being and their property.
Respetuosa de sus bienes naturales, ¿verdad? De sus propiedades. Las guerras no se hacen.
Wars are not made to kill the population or to kill for the sake of killing.
Por matar.